Once upon a time, Sarah and John, who appeared to be an everyday couple, lived in a calm suburban neighborhood. They appeared to be the picture of a happy marriage to the outside world. They had two beautiful children and had been married for more than 10 years. However, their relationship was far from ideal when they were alone. Sarah's husband, John, was a true scumbag. He was good at keeping his crazy behavior and infidelity hidden from his wife. Sarah decided to ignore John's behavior despite the fact that it looked as though a new rumor about his mishaps broke every week. She genuinely loved him, or maybe she was simply too terrified to face the truth. Sarah waited impatiently for John to get home one fateful evening as the sun fell below the horizon, spreading a warm orange glow across their suburban neighborhood. She was used to his erratic schedule because he had gone out late once more. She was startled out of her thoughts as the phone rang. A neighbor had just called with terrible news. "Sarah," the neighbor's voice quivered, "you won't believe what's happened. John got terribly drunk tonight, and he fell straight into a sewer manhole while trying to keep up with a beautiful woman. They rushed him to the hospital, and the doctors say his injuries are critical." Sarah's heart sank as she listened to the horrifying details. Her husband's reckless behavior had finally caught up with him, and it seemed as though his charmed life was coming to a crashing halt. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized the gravity of the situation. The following days were a blur for Sarah. She spent countless hours by John's bedside in the hospital, praying for his recovery. The doctors did everything they could, but the injuries he had sustained were severe, and his condition remained critical. One evening, as Sarah sat by John's side, he was barely conscious and unable to speak. She held his hand, tears streaming down her face. When an unexpected thought crossed her mind, she turned to a friend who was visiting and whispered, "You know, but now I will always know where he is." Her friend looked puzzled, unsure of what Sarah meant. Sarah continued, "For years I've worried about where he was, what he was doing, and who he was with. But now, no matter what happens, I'll always know where he is, right here in this hospital bed." Two friends, John and Mike, were at their favorite bar when they decided to place a bet. John said, "I bet you $1,000 that I can drink 8 shots of tequila in a row without wincing." Mike, always ready to accept the challenge, agreed to the bet. John put down the glasses, drank them one by one without flinching, and won the bet. Impressed, Mike handed over $1,000 and said, "I can't believe you did that without any reaction." John grinned and replied, "Well, you should know that I had 6 drinks before you came here." Once upon a time in a small, picturesque town, there was a pizza delivery guy named Benny. Benny was renowned for his punctuality and his uncanny ability to deliver pizzas faster than anyone else. He had a reputation for taking any delivery challenge head-on, no matter how bizarre or difficult it might be. One sunny afternoon, Benny received a special order from a customer named Mr. Jenkins, who lived on the outskirts of town. Mr. Jenkins was known for his beautiful garden, and he had ordered a deluxe, extra cheesy pizza with all the toppings he could think of. Benny was determined to make this delivery stand out, and he was excited to prove his skills. As Benny approached Mr. Jenkins's house, he noticed how the sun glistened on the vibrant flowers in the garden, creating a picturesque scene. However, what he didn't notice was the rather large and fresh pile of manure that had been recently deposited in the driveway by Mr. Jenkins's prized cow, Bessie. With his mind solely focused on delivering the perfect pizza, Benny approached the house with the pizza box balanced expertly on his hand. He was so confident in his abilities that he didn't even glance down at the driveway. With a determined stride, he took a mighty step forward. Suddenly, disaster struck. Benny's foot landed squarely on the slippery manure pile, causing him to lose his balance completely. The pizza box flew from his hand and landed face down in the manure. Benny himself ended up on his backside, covered in manure from head to toe. Horrified and embarrassed, Benny picked himself up and turned to face Mr. Jenkins, who had come out to see what all the commotion was about. Mr. Jenkins looked at the ruined pizza and then at Benny, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. Before Mr. Jenkins could say a word, Benny, always quick with a sense of humor, tried to salvage the situation. He pointed at the manure-covered pizza and said with a grin, "Don't worry, Mr. Jenkins. I've got the extra cheesy manure pizza right here. It's farm fresh and extra special." Mr. Jenkins couldn't help but burst into laughter at Benny's wit and the absurdity of the situation. He waved off the ruined pizza and said, "You know what, Benny? You've delivered something I'll never forget. You've certainly earned your tip today." Late in the evening, hearing the doorbell, the owner of the house named Jack hurried to open the front door and found an old friend and a big dog next to him. Come on in, buddy," he greeted the guest joyfully. A friend entered the house and sat down on a comfortable sofa while the dog chased the owner's cat, knocked over a table lamp and several vases, eventually settling in the best chair. So they spent the whole evening telling each other interesting stories of their lives, because they had not seen each other for a very long time and were glad of the long-awaited meeting. When the guest was about to leave, Jack said with sarcasm in his voice, "Try not to forget your dog." "A dog? I don't have any dog," the guest replied. "I thought it was your dog." Many years ago, the renowned British actor Samuel Foote was touring the countryside, bringing his theatrical talents to small towns and villages across England. One day, as he traveled through a quaint little hamlet, he decided to stop for a meal at a local inn. Samuel Foote had a reputation for his sharp wit and love of a good meal. He savored every bite of the delicious lunch that the inn's cook had prepared. So, when the innkeeper approached him and asked, "Did you enjoy your meal, sir?" Samuel, in his typically jovial manner, replied, "I must say this is the best lunch I've had in all of England." The innkeeper, with a knowing smile, leaned in and said, "Well, sir, I'm delighted to hear that. But you see, we take great pride in our mayor here in our town." Samuel raised an eyebrow, curious about where this conversation was headed. "Your mayor? What does he have to do with my lunch?" The innkeeper chuckled and said, "You see, it's a bit of a tradition here. We are required to mention our esteemed mayor in all our conversations and show him the utmost respect." Samuel Foote was taken aback by this peculiar custom, but didn't want to cause a fuss. He decided to humor the innkeeper and said, "Ah, I understand. So, aside from your mayor, this was indeed the best lunch I've ever had." The innkeeper's eyes twinkled as he continued, "Excellent, sir. But I must remind you that our mayor deserves recognition at every opportunity." Feeling a bit bewildered and increasingly irritated, Samuel Foote sighed and said, "Very well then, let me clarify. Today I had the best lunch in England, except for your esteemed mayor, of course." The innkeeper's smile widened, and he promptly escorted Samuel Foote to meet the mayor of the town. The mayor, a man of great ego and influence, listened to the innkeeper's account of the situation. He leaned forward and said to Samuel, "In our fair town, it is customary to honor our mayor in all conversations. Failure to do so can result in a fine or even a day in prison." Samuel Foote, not willing to waste any more time on this absurdity, reached into his pocket, pulled out a handful of coins, and handed them to the mayor. "Very well, mayor," he said, "here's your tribute. But I must say I've never encountered a more peculiar custom in all my travels." As he left the mayor's office, Samuel Foote couldn't help but shake his head in disbelief. He mumbled to himself, "I've met some fools in my day, but that innkeeper takes the cake. Except for the mayor, of course." And so, the actor continued on his journey, leaving behind a tale of the quirkiest town tradition he had ever encountered, where even a compliment came with a hefty price. In a quaint English town, a courtroom was buzzing with anticipation as a high-stakes trial was about to begin. The prosecutor, Mr. Williams, was known for his arrogance and a not-so-stellar reputation. As he prepared to call his first witness, he approached an elderly lady named Mrs. Jones, who had a reputation for her candidness and fearlessness. Mr. Williams, trying to appear courteous, leaned in and asked, "Do you know me, Mrs. Jones?" Mrs. Jones, without hesitation, replied, "Yes, I know you, Mr. Williams. I've known you since you were a scrappy boy, and frankly, you've become one of the biggest disappointments in my life. You are constantly lying, cheating on your wife, manipulating people, and gossiping behind their backs. You're like a pompous turkey who doesn't really have a drop of the brains necessary to achieve something in life. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the prosecutor's face turned various shades of red. He struggled to maintain his composure. Finally, when the power of speech returned to him, Mr. Williams pointed to the person sitting in the hall and asked, "Do you know the defense attorney, Mrs. Jones?" Mrs. Jones replied, Of course, of course. I've known Mr. Bradley, like you, since he was a kid. He is lazy, fixed on his many phobias, and has problems with alcohol. He can't agree with anyone. He has a reputation as the most incompetent lawyer in the city. I'm not talking about the fact that he cheated on his wife with 3 different women. One of them is your wife. Of course, I know him. The entire courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers as they witnessed the unraveling drama. The defense attorney, Mr. Bradley, sat pale and trembling, unable to believe what he had just heard. At that moment, the judge, who had been silently observing the spectacle, decided to intervene. With a stern expression, he called both lawyers to the bench. "If any of you idiots ask if she knows me," the judge said firmly, "I'll send you both to the electric chair." The judge's words hung heavily in the air, and the courtroom fell into a nervous silence. No one dared to ask Mrs. Jones any more questions. It was a trial like no other, where the witness's brutal honesty left both the prosecutor and defense attorney in a state of shock, and even the judge was not spared from her candid assessments.